A wild horse emerges from the shadows on a rainy night, defying the impossible to change the fate of a millionaire in danger. What it did, no one could have ever predicted. The rain pounded Cedar Rapids that May evening. Fat droplets ricocheted off the asphalt, while Ryan Mitchell observed the city through the window of his adapted car. Outside, the streetlights formed yellowish halos reflected in puddles, creating an almost dreamlike atmosphere. "You can go straight home, Mike. I'm exhausted," Ryan said to his driver, adjusting himself in his customized wheelchair. The cocktail reception for the inauguration of the new assistive technology laboratory had been a success. Dozens of investors, scientists, and celebrities had attended to see the latest project from Mitchell Technologies, the company that Ryan had transformed into a national leader in developing solutions for people with disabilities. "Sir, are you all right? You seem worried," asked Mike, adjusting the rearview mirror to observe his boss. Ryan sighed, running his fingers through the grey hair at his temples. The question made him think of Victor Harriman, his business partner for almost a decade. The disagreements between them had intensified in recent weeks. "Just tired, Mike," he answered, turning his gaze back to the window. "And with some difficult decisions to make." The car continued along Oak Street, avoiding the congested downtown. The rain intensified, transforming into a downpour that drastically reduced visibility. To save time, Mike opted for an alternative route that crossed the Whitewater Bridge. It was as they crossed the bridge that Ryan felt a shiver run down his spine. Something wasn't right. The bridge, normally well lit, was partially dark. Some lights seemed to have been deliberately damaged. "Mike, don't you think it's strange?" Before he could complete the sentence, bright headlights appeared in the rearview mirror, approaching at high speed. A black vehicle was advancing threateningly toward them. "Sir, hold on!" Mike shouted, trying to accelerate, but the car was already being pushed toward the shoulder. The impact was violent. Ryan felt his body thrown against the seatbelt. The black car forced them to stop, blocking any possibility of escape. "What do these maniacs want?" Mike muttered, reaching for his cell phone to call the police. Everything happened very quickly. 3 hooded men jumped out of the vehicle. One of them yanked Mike from the car brutally, while the other 2 forced open the door next to Ryan. "Please, take whatever you want," Ryan tried to negotiate, but his words fell on deaf ears. They forcefully pulled him from the vehicle, completely ignoring his physical limitations. Ryan felt the impact of the wet asphalt on his back, the sharp pain spreading throughout his body. "Where's the flash drive?" one of the men demanded, his voice distorted by the mask he wore. "What flash drive? I don't know what you're talking about," Ryan responded, confused and terrified. The man violently searched his pockets while another examined his wheelchair hastily, looking for something. The third, who seemed to be the leader, kept his distance, observing. "It's not on him," reported the one searching Ryan. "Not in the chair either," confirmed the other. The leader made a subtle gesture with his head. The other 2 men lifted Ryan by his arms, dragging him to the bridge railing. Ryan tried to resist, but his strength was no match for the attackers. He felt the cold concrete of the railing against his back and the threatening void beyond it. "Please, don't do this," he begged, his heart racing uncontrollably. "I have family, I can pay whatever you want." The leader approached, leaned in, and whispered in his ear, "Victor sends his regards." In that instant, Ryan understood everything. It wasn't a robbery, but something much worse. A betrayal. With a brutal push, his body was thrown into the Fredascas. The fall seemed to last an eternity. The icy wind cut across his face as the darkness swallowed him. The wheelchair had been left behind. He was alone, falling toward the turbulent waters of the Whitewater River. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We continue. The impact against the water was brutal. Ryan felt as if 1,000 needles were piercing his skin simultaneously. The current, strengthened by the recent rains, immediately swept him away. The darkness around him was absolute, broken only by occasional glimpses of lightning cutting across the sky. His arms flailed frantically in the water, but his physical condition limited his movements. Years ago, a car accident had left him with partial paralysis of his legs. Since then, he had depended on a wheelchair to get around. Now, in the water, he felt completely vulnerable. "Help!" he shouted, but his voice was swallowed by the sound of the storm and the furious current. Water invaded his lungs with each attempt to breathe. His soaked clothes weighed like lead, pulling him under. Ryan fought, but each second in the water diminished his strength. His mind began to blur. Flashes of memory crossed his thoughts. His daughter Amanda smiling when she received her first guitar, his ex-wife Helen on the day of their divorce, his partner Victor on the day they met in college. Victor. Why? He thought, as he felt he could no longer resist. In the hills near the river, a wild horse with dark brown coat raised its head abruptly. It was an imposing animal, with visible scars across its body, marks of a difficult life in the wild, lands around Cedar Rapids. Known to local residents, the animal had appeared in the region about a year ago, having escaped from some farm or ranch. All attempts to capture it had failed. Its attentive ears caught something, a distant cry almost inaudible beneath the roar of the storm. The animal seemed restless, its eyes fixed in the direction of the river. Something in the horse's behavior demonstrated more than simple curiosity. It was almost determination. With a strong neigh, the horse charged down the hill. Its powerful hooves displaced mud and stones as it ran with an instinctive urgency. Reaching the bank without hesitation, the animal plunged into the turbulent waters. Meanwhile, Ryan was losing the battle against the current. His consciousness was rapidly fading. So this is how it ends, he thought, resigned as he felt his body sink. It was then that he felt something solid touching his arm. At first, he thought it was a piece of wood dragged by the current, but it moved deliberately closer. In his semi-conscious state, Ryan sensed a presence beside him, something alive, warm, strong. The horse, swimming determinedly against the current, positioned itself beside the drowning man. With a precise movement, it managed to push Ryan up, keeping him partially out of the water. "A horse," Ryan mumbled, incredulous, instinctively grabbing onto the animal's mane. The battle against the current remained fierce. The horse swam, with all its strength, trying to reach a shallower part of the river. The rain gave no respite, but the animal didn't give up. There was an almost supernatural determination in its movements. In the distance, a beam of light cut through the darkness. A civil defense boat, patrolling the risk areas during the storm, spotted the unusual movement in the river. "There. Someone's in the water," shouted one of the agents, pointing, "and it looks like... My God, is that a horse?" The boat accelerated toward them. The officers could hardly believe what they were seeing, an unconscious man being kept on the surface by a wild horse swimming against the current. "In 15 years of service, I've never seen anything like this," commented one of the agents, throwing a life preserver in their direction. With skill and speed, the team managed to pull Ryan into the boat. He was pale, his lips blue from the cold, but still breathing. "Let's take him to the hospital immediately," ordered the team leader, as they initiated first aid. The horse, seeming to understand that its mission was complete, swam to the shore and exited the water, shaking itself vigorously. From a safe distance, it watched the boat leave with the man it had just saved. One of the agents looked back, contemplating the animal that remained motionless under the rain that was now subsiding. "Should we do something about the horse?" he asked. "Leave it," the other replied. "It seems to know exactly what it's doing." St. Luke's Hospital was bustling with activity when Ryan Mitchell was admitted to the emergency room. Doctors and nurses rushed to stabilize him. Hypothermia, water ingestion, possible internal trauma. His condition was critical, but stable. Jessica Rodriguez, Ryan's personal assistant for 5 years, arrived hastily at the hospital. Her red eyes betrayed the crying and concern. Her heels echoed down the corridor as she determinedly advanced to the information desk. "I'm here to see Ryan Mitchell. I'm his assistant," she said, her trembling voice revealing the nervousness she was trying to hide. "He's in the ICU, ma'am. Only family members are allowed in," replied the receptionist in a professional tone. "He has no close family here. I'm the closest thing to that," Jessica insisted, nervously tucking her curly hair behind her ear. "Please, I need to see him." While Jessica was arguing with the receptionist. A tall, imposing man entered the hospital, followed by 2 security guards. Victor Harriman always knew how to attract attention. At 45, he maintained his physical shape with daily workouts, and his artificially tanned face gave him an appearance of perpetual vitality. His custom Italian suit contrasted with the simple environment of the public hospital. "Jessica," he called, approaching with false concern. "I came as soon as I heard. How is he?" Jessica eyed Ryan's business partner with barely disguised suspicion. She had always distrusted Victor's intentions in the company, but never had concrete proof of her suspicions. "Stable, but in the ICU. They haven't given us details," she responded dryly. Victor nodded to one of the passing doctors, recognizing him from charity events. "Dr. Marshall, good to see you. I'm here for my partner, Ryan Mitchell." The doctor approached, immediately recognizing the influential businessman. "Mr. Harriman, I didn't expect to see you here. Ryan is like a brother to me. Can you tell us how he's doing?" Dr. Marshall hesitated, looking at Jessica. "Mr. Mitchell is out of danger, but still unconscious. He suffered severe hypothermia and ingested a significant amount of water. He also presents some bruises consistent with a fall." "Fall? But how did this happen?" asked Jessica, feeling a knot form in her throat. "We still don't know the details. Civil Defense found him in the river during the storm. It was an extraordinary rescue from what I was told." "In the river?" Victor feigned surprise. "My God, he was so stressed lately, I fear that—" Jessica interrupted him abruptly. "What are you insinuating, Victor?" "I'm not insinuating anything, Jessica, but we all know that Ryan has been facing personal problems. The divorce, the distance from his daughter, and the pressure at the company has been enormous. He would never try something like that," Jessica affirmed categorically. "Gentlemen, please," the doctor intervened. "We still have no conclusions about what happened. The police are investigating." At that moment, a news team entered the hospital lobby. The journalist, microphone in hand, advanced directly to them. "Mr. Harriman, could you give us a statement about the incident with your partner?" Victor hesitated for a second, but soon assumed his well-rehearsed expression of concern. "We are all very shaken. Ryan is a brilliant man who has transformed the lives of so many people with his innovations. Unfortunately, sometimes brilliance comes with great internal pressures." "Are you suggesting that it was an attempt at something self-inflicted?" asked the reporter, avoiding the direct word. "I can't confirm anything, but Ryan has been fighting his inner demons," replied Victor, with false sadness. Perhaps the pressure was too much. Jessica watched the scene, horrified. She knew Ryan better than anyone. His strength, his determination, his love for life, despite all the difficulties. Something was wrong with that story. Discreetly, she moved away from the commotion and headed to the parking lot. Inside her car, she picked up the phone and dialed a number. "Homicide Department, Detective Sarah Field speaking," a firm voice answered on the other end of the line. "Sarah, it's Jessica. We need to talk about Ryan Mitchell." "The businessman. Who fell in the river? We're already investigating." "It wasn't an accident," Jessica said with conviction, "and it definitely wasn't something he did to himself. I know Ryan. Something is very wrong with this story." "Do you have any proof of that?" "Not yet, but I'll find it, and I think I know where to start." The morning after the incident, the news of the wheelchair-bound businessman rescued by a horse already occupied the headlines of the main news outlets across the country. The mysterious circumstances, combined with the almost mythical element of the rescue, captured the public's imagination. At the Cedar Rapids Municipal Shelter, Robert Thompson, a middle-aged man in worn clothes, watched the community television with growing interest. The report showed images of the rescue site and interviews with civil defense agents. "It was unbelievable," said one of the agents. "The horse kept the man on the surface as if it knew exactly what it was doing." Robert felt a chill. That bridge. He knew it well. 3 months ago, after losing everything in a fire, he had found temporary shelter under that structure. Just the night before, during the storm, he was there. "Hey, Mrs. Wilson," he called to the social worker who was organizing donations. "I need to talk to the police." "Police?" What happened, Mr. Thompson? I saw something last night. Something related to that businessman on TV. At the precinct, Detective Sarah Fields was conducting the preliminary investigation. The first pieces of evidence pointed to an accident. Ryan's car had been found abandoned on the bridge, with the driver's door open. The initial theory was that Mike, the driver, had stopped to check something, and Ryan, trying to get out alone, had fallen. Mike, recovering from a concussion at the same hospital, insisted that everything had happened very quickly. "We were attacked," he repeated. "Masked men, they forced us to stop." His statements, however, were viewed with skepticism due to the head trauma he had suffered. The official version gaining strength, propelled by strategic statements from Victor Harriman, was that of a possible desperate act by Ryan. That's when Robert entered the precinct, asking to speak to someone about the case. "I saw everything," he said, sitting uncomfortably in the interrogation room. "I was under the bridge when it happened." Sarah observed the man carefully, assessing his credibility. "Continue, Mr. Thompson." "It was around midnight. The rain was heavy. I was huddled in my corner trying to stay dry. That's when I heard sudden breaking on the bridge above me. Then shouts." "Were you able to see anything?" "Not much because of the rain. But I saw shadows moving. I heard when someone fell into the water." Robert paused, taking a breath. "What I can guarantee is that I saw two vehicles leaving in a hurry afterward, a large black car and a motorcycle." "Are you sure about this?" "Absolutely. The motorcycle passed very close to where I was when it came down from the bridge. It was one of those sports bikes, you know, and the rider wore a helmet with a snake design on the side." Sarah made detailed notes. "Anything else you remember?" "Yes. On the car there was a sticker on the rear window, a symbol that I recognized because I see it every day when I pass the avenue. It was the symbol of that technology company. What's the name again?" "Harriman Tech." The detective felt her heart race. Harriman Tech was Victor Harriman's company. That information changed everything. Meanwhile, at the Mitchell Technologies office, Jessica frantically searched through the company's digital files. As Ryan's assistant, she had access to almost all documents, but she knew there was a private server that only Ryan and Victor could access. "I need to get into that server," she muttered to herself. After several failed attempts, she remembered something. 2 days before the incident, Ryan had asked her to store a small flash drive in his personal safe. "Guard this with your life, Jessica," he had said. "It's my insurance." Jessica rushed to the safe disguised in a bookshelf, and using the combination that only she and Ryan knew, retrieved the small device. Connecting it to the computer, she found a single file, an audio recording. When she played it, Victor's voice echoed through the speakers. "The Chinese have already offered 50 million for Project Aurora. We can divert the funds to the accounts in the Cayman Islands before selling. Ryan doesn't need to know." The recording continued with details about the scheme to illegally sell the company's main technology, a revolutionary neural interface system that allowed people with paralysis to control devices with their thoughts. It was Ryan's masterpiece, still in the experimental phase. "My God," whispered Jessica, understanding the gravity of the situation. He was going to sell the project behind Ryan's back. Her phone rang, startling her. It was Sarah Fields. "Jessica, we have a witness. Someone saw two vehicles leaving the bridge right after the incident. One of them had the Harriman Tech logo." "I need to meet you right now," Jessica responded with urgency. "I just discovered the motive." On the third day after the incident, Ryan Mitchell finally regained consciousness. His eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the soft light in the hospital room. Confused, he tried to move but felt pain throughout his body. "Stay calm, Mr. Mitchell," said a middle-aged nurse, approaching the bed. "You're at St. Luke's Hospital. You had an accident." The memories returned in disconnected flashes. The rain, the black car, the impact of the water, and something else, a presence, a warmth that kept him alive in the cold water. "How?" His voice came out hoarse, his throat still irritated from the river water. "It was a miracle," replied the nurse, adjusting the IV. "Everyone's talking about it. You were saved by a horse." "A horse?" Ryan frowned, trying to organize his nebulous memories. Yes, a wild horse. It swam to you in the river and kept you afloat until civil defense arrived. It's in all the newspapers. Before he could process that information, the door to the room opened. Jessica entered hurriedly, her face lighting up when she saw Ryan conscious. "Thank God!" she exclaimed, running to carefully embrace him. "I thought I had lost you." "Jessica," Ryan smiled weakly. "What happened? I remember something about Victor." Jessica's expression hardened. "We have a lot to talk about, but not now. You need to rest." "No," Ryan insisted, trying to sit up. "I need to know. It was him, wasn't it? Victor tried to kill me." Jessica hesitated, looking at the nurse who pretended not to hear while checking the equipment. "The police are investigating," she finally replied. "I found the flash drive with the recording, Ryan, and there's a witness who saw a Harriman Tech car on the bridge that night." Ryan closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing the confirmation of what he already suspected. When he opened them again, there was a renewed determination in his gaze. "I want to see the horse." "What?" "The horse that saved me. I need to see it." "Ryan, you just woke up after nearly—" Jessica stopped herself, choosing her words. "After nearly departing. We don't even know where this animal is." "Then find out," he asked, holding her hand. "It's important to me." Meanwhile, in the outskirts of Cedar Rapids, the wild horse that had been the protagonist of the rescue had returned to the hills. It walked restlessly among the trees, as if looking for something. Occasionally, it would stop and look toward the city. David Wilson, a retired veterinarian who lived on a small farm in the area, observed the animal with binoculars. For months he had been trying to establish contact with the horse, leaving food and water at strategic points. But the animal always kept its distance. "You're famous now, my friend," murmured David, seeing the horse grazing peacefully a few meters from his property. His phone rang. "Hello? Mr. Wilson, this is Jessica Rodriguez, Ryan Mitchell's assistant. The businessman from the rescue. How did you get my number?" "Civil Defense gave me your contact. They said you know the area and the wild animals in the region well." "Yes, especially that horse. I've been observing it for months." "It's exactly about him that I want to talk," said Jessica. "Mr. Mitchell wishes to see the animal." David laughed softly. "Well, miss, I'm afraid it's not that simple. This horse is completely wild. It has never allowed human approach." "You don't understand," Jessica insisted. "It's very important to Ryan. He just woke up, and one of the first things he asked was to see the animal that saved him." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Maybe we can try," David finally said. "There's something special about this horse. I've always known that." "What do you mean?" "I can't explain it. It's as if it has a perception, a sensitivity that goes beyond animal instinct. And after this rescue," David paused. "Look, I'm not a mystical man, but there are things that science still doesn't completely explain. Do you think you can help find it?" "I know exactly where it is now. The question is convincing it to approach." At the hospital, Ryan had spent the last few hours watching reports about his rescue. The images captured by the civil defense team briefly showed the horse swimming beside him, keeping him above water with precise movements. Something in those images deeply touched him. In the darkness of the water, when he thought all was lost, it was that animal, a being he had never seen before, that risked its own life to save him. "Why?" he murmured to himself. "Why did you do that?" On the television, the case coverage changed to an interview with Victor Harriman. His face appeared sad, but his eyes revealed a barely disguised satisfaction. "We're all rooting for Ryan's recovery," he was saying to the reporter, "but it's important that he receives the necessary psychological support when he recovers physically. People in his condition often face emotional challenges that others don't understand." Ryan felt his blood boil. Victor was carefully constructing a narrative, painting him as someone mentally unstable, preparing the ground in case he survived, and accused him. Ryan's phone, recovered from the river and now dry on the bedside table, vibrated with a message from Jessica. "We found the horse. We'll bring it to you as soon as you're discharged." For the first time in days, a genuine smile illuminated Ryan's face. That unknown animal had somehow become a symbol of hope, an unexpected connection amid the chaos his life had become. "I'm looking forward to meeting you, my friend," he whispered, looking out the window toward the distant hills. A week after the incident, Ryan was discharged from the hospital. Reporters crowded at the entrance, eager for images of the businessman who had miraculously survived. Jessica had meticulously organized everything to avoid press harassment. A car with tinted windows was waiting at the emergency exit, away from curious eyes. "Ready to go home?" she asked, helping him settle into a temporary wheelchair. "I don't want to go home," Ryan replied, surprising her. "I want to go to the office first." "Ryan, you just got discharged. You need to rest." "What I need is to face this situation head-on," he responded firmly. "Victor is controlling the narrative, painting me as someone mentally unstable. I can't allow that to continue." Jessica hesitated, but she knew that determined expression on her boss's face. It was the same one she had seen when he decided to found Mitchell Technologies, against all those who doubted that a man with a disability could revolutionize the assistive technology market. "All right," she finally agreed, "but we'll go discreetly. Victor can't know you're there." The Mitchell Technologies building, an impressive glass and steel structure in the business center of Cedar Rapids, was in full activity when they arrived. Using the service elevator and secondary entrances, they managed to reach Ryan's office without being noticed by most employees. "Looks like nothing has changed," commented Ryan, observing his spacious office, with a view of the city. "On the contrary," replied Jessica, closing the door behind them. "Victor called an extraordinary board meeting for tomorrow. From what I've been able to find out, he's going to propose taking your position permanently, citing your temporary incapacity." Ryan smiled bitterly. "Predictable. And Project Aurora. Still, on the secure servers, but Victor has been trying to access it, without success so far." "Great. And what about the police investigation?" "Detective Fields is building the case, but we need more evidence. The recording on the flash drive and Robert's testimony are strong, but Victor's lawyers will certainly claim that the recording was taken out of context and question the credibility of a homeless man." Ryan was silent for a moment, thoughtful. Then he went to his computer and began typing rapidly. "What are you doing?" "Checking the corporate bank transfers from the last few weeks," he replied, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Victor is greedy, but not particularly smart when it comes to covering his tracks." After a few minutes of intensive searching, Ryan let out a triumphant exclamation. "Here, 3 transfers to an account in the Cayman Islands. Together, they total exactly $10 million, the advance amount mentioned in the recording." Jessica approached to see better. "That's perfect. I'll inform Detective Fields immediately." At that moment, the office door opened. Victor Harriman entered, freezing when he saw Ryan sitting at his desk. His expression of shock was soon replaced by a calculated smile. "Ryan, what a wonderful surprise. I didn't expect to see you back at work so soon," he said, quickly recovering. "We were all so worried." "I imagine," Ryan replied coldly. "Especially you, right, Victor?" A tense silence filled the room. Jessica remained at Ryan's side, her posture defensive. "I don't know what you're insinuating," Victor responded, his smile faltering slightly. "But it's understandable that you're confused after the incident." "I'm perfectly lucid," retorted Ryan. "Lucid enough to remember exactly what happened on that bridge, and to discover what you've been doing behind my back." Victor's face paled slightly. "Ryan, I think you should go home and rest. Clearly you're not in a condition to discover that you tried to sell Project Aurora to the Chinese," interrupted Ryan, "or to realize that you used company money to bribe those men on the bridge." Victor glanced quickly at Ryan's computer, noticing the banking information on the screen. His expression changed completely. "You have no proof of any of this," he said, his voice now laden with threat. "Actually, I do," replied Ryan, pointing to the computer. "The bank transfers, the recording of our last conversation. the testimony of someone who saw your car on the bridge that night. Detective Fields will love all of this." For a moment, Victor seemed to consider his options. Then, suddenly, his behavior changed. A sinister smile formed on his lips. "You know what your problem is, Ryan. You've always been too confident. You think you're invincible just because you survived a car accident years ago and built a successful company." He took a step forward. "But you're not invincible, and this time there won't be a horse to save you." Jessica positioned herself between the two. "Back off, Victor. The police are already on their way." He laughed. "Really? And how long do you think it will take for them to arrive?" "Long enough for a man in a wheelchair to accidentally fall out of the 10th floor window." Ryan remained impassive. "Do you really think I would come here without a plan B?" At that exact moment, the door opened again. Detective Sarah Fields entered, accompanied by 2 police officers. "Victor Harriman," she announced formally, "you're being detained for questioning related to the attempted murder of Ryan Mitchell and misappropriation of corporate funds." Victor's face contorted in fury. "This is absurd. You have no proof against me." "On the contrary," replied Sarah, "we have more than enough to start, including," she held up a small device, "this recording of your confession a few minutes ago, as—" The police handcuffed Victor and led him out. Ryan exchanged a meaningful look with Jessica. "How did you know he would confess?" she asked quietly. "I didn't," admitted Ryan. "But I know his ego. He wouldn't resist the opportunity to gloat, especially when he thought he had the upper hand." Sarah approached Ryan after Victor's departure. "That was risky, Mr. Mitchell. He could have tried something." "It was worth it," replied Ryan. "Now, there's something more important I need to do." "What? Jessica and—" Sarah asked simultaneously. "Meet the horse that saved my life. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We continue." David Wilson's small property was about an hour from downtown Cedar Rapids. The winding path through the hills offered breathtaking views of the city below, but Ryan hardly noticed them. His mind was focused on a single goal: to meet the animal that, against all odds, had risked itself to save him. "Are you sure it will be there?" he asked Jessica, who was carefully driving around the curves of the dirt road. "Mr. Wilson guaranteed it. He said the horse has been appearing every day at the same time, near a stream on his property." Ryan nodded, feeling a mixture of anxiety and expectation. Since watching the images of the rescue, he couldn't stop thinking about the animal. There was something about that connection that surpassed rational understanding, as if fate had intertwined their lives for some reason still unknown. When they finally arrived at the farm, they were greeted by David Wilson, a man with a rustic appearance, with graying hair and a tan that betrayed a life outdoors. "Mr. Mitchell," he greeted, approaching the car, "it's an honor to meet you. Your rescue was truly extraordinary." "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Wilson, and thank you for helping us find the horse." David smiled. "Well, finding him isn't the challenge. He's at the stream right now. The real challenge will be convincing him to approach. He's never allowed human contact before." With Jessica's help, Ryan transferred to his wheelchair. The terrain was uneven, but David had improvised a path with wide boards that allowed access to an observation point near the stream. "Let's take it slow," David advised, guiding them along the path. "He's extremely sensitive to sudden movements and noises." As they approached, Ryan felt his heart accelerate. Among the trees, the imposing silhouette of the animal began to materialize. The horse, with dark brown coat and a small white patch on its chest, drank water peacefully from the crystal-clear stream. "There he is," whispered David. "Let's stop here for now. We don't want to scare him." From a safe distance, Ryan observed the animal with admiration. It was larger than he had imagined, with well-defined muscles and a posture that emanated strength and dignity. The visible scars on its body told stories of struggles and survival. "He's magnificent," murmured Ryan. "Does he have a name?" "Not officially," replied David, "but the locals call him Ghost because he appears and disappears like one. I prefer to call him Guardian. It seems more appropriate after what he did." Ryan reflected for a moment. "Thunder," he said finally. "I'll call him Thunder." The horse abruptly raised its head, as if it had heard its new name, and looked directly at the group, its dark eyes fixed on Ryan with a disconcerting intensity. "He recognized you," whispered Jessica, impressed. "Impossible," replied David. "It was too dark that night, and horses don't have facial memory like we do." "Maybe it's not the appearance," suggested Ryan. "Maybe it's something more." On an impulse, Ryan began to advance alone with the wheelchair, ignoring the whispered protests of Jessica and David. "What are you doing?" hissed Jessica. "It could be dangerous." Ryan didn't respond. He continued advancing slowly toward the animal, keeping his eyes fixed on its own. The horse remained motionless, observing him with curiosity. When he was about 5 meters away, Ryan stopped. "Hello, Thunder," he said softly. "I came to thank you for saving my life." The horse tilted, its head slightly, as if it were trying to understand the words. "I know it must seem strange," continued Ryan. "A man in a wheelchair talking to a wild horse, but nothing in our story is conventional, is it?" To everyone's amazement, the horse took a step forward, reducing the distance between them. Its movements were cautious, but didn't show fear, just a calculated curiosity. "My God," murmured David, "I've never seen him approach anyone like this." Ryan slowly extended his hand, palm up, a gesture of peace and invitation. "I won't hurt you," he said softly. "I promise." Time seemed to freeze as everyone watched, holding their breath. With deliberately slow steps, Thunder continued advancing until his muzzle was centimeters from Ryan's extended hand. There was a moment of hesitation, and then, with surprising gentleness, the horse touched Ryan's palm with its muzzle. The contact was brief, but electrifying. Ryan felt a wave of emotion coursing through his body, as if an invisible connection had formed between him and the animal. Unexpected tears appeared in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered again. Jessica, observing the scene from a distance, felt like a witness to something almost sacred. The expression on Ryan's face was one of pure gratitude and admiration. She had never seen him so vulnerable and at the same time so strong. David, for his part, couldn't hide his astonishment. "In 30 years as a veterinarian, I've never seen anything like this," he commented quietly. "It's as if they knew each other." Thunder backed away a few steps, still keeping his eyes fixed on Ryan. Then, to everyone's additional surprise, he slightly lowered his head, a gesture that almost seemed like a bow, before turning and galloping toward the hills. The silence that followed was laden with meaning. Ryan remained motionless, his eyes following the animal until it disappeared among the trees. "He'll come back," he stated with conviction, "and when that happens, I'll be ready." Jessica placed her hand on Ryan's shoulder. "Ready for what?" A determined smile appeared on Ryan's face. "For the next chapter of our story." During the following weeks, Ryan's routine gained a new element. 3 times a week, he visited David Wilson's property, always at the same time. When the sun began to set behind the mountains, tinting the sky orange and pink, Thunder, as if he had an internal clock, appeared punctually at the stream. With each visit, the distance between man and animal diminished. What had begun as a brief and hesitant contact gradually transformed into mutual trust. "I never imagined a wild horse could be tamed so quickly," commented David on a particularly beautiful afternoon, observing how Thunder now allowed Ryan to stroke his neck. "I'm not taming him," Ryan gently corrected. "We're building a friendship." Jessica, who accompanied Ryan on each visit, noticed the transformation in her boss and friend. The bitterness that the incident with Victor had left seemed to dissipate with each encounter with Thunder. There was a new light in his eyes, a renewed purpose. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, seeing him absorbed in thoughts while watching Thunder grazing peacefully a few meters away. "I'm thinking about possibilities," replied Ryan. "About how to transform this experience into something greater than the two of us." That night, during the return to Cedar Rapids, Ryan remained unusually silent, making notes on his tablet with intense concentration. Jessica respected his space, recognizing the signs that a big idea was being born. The next morning, Ryan called an emergency meeting with his executive team. The conference room at Mitchell Technologies was packed, engineers, developers, marketing specialists, all curious about the imminent announcement. "Good morning, everyone," Ryan began, positioning his wheelchair at the head of the table. "Thank you for answering my call on such short notice." His eyes scanned the room, noting the expectant expressions. Since Victor's preventive detention, the company had entered a period of uncertainty. Everyone was waiting for clear direction. "As you know, I recently went through a transformative experience," he continued, "an experience that made me rethink not only my personal life, but also our mission as a company." He paused, organizing his thoughts. Mitchell Technologies was born out of my own need to create technologies that would allow people with disabilities to live with more autonomy and dignity. But now I see that we can expand that vision. With a gesture, he projected onto the large screen some images, conceptual sketches of a modern complex in the midst of nature. "This is the Renaissance Project," he announced enthusiastically, "a pioneering rehabilitation and research center that will combine our cutting-edge assistive technology with alternative therapies, including equine therapy." Murmurs of surprise ran through the room. Mitchell Technologies had always been a pure technology company, hardware and software. This proposal represented a significant shift. "I know what you're thinking," Ryan continued. "It's an unexpected direction, but let me explain why I believe it's the right path." In the following minutes, Ryan shared his vision with growing passion. He spoke about how the connection with Thunder had accelerated his own physical and emotional recovery. He cited studies on the benefits of equine therapy for people with various conditions, from cerebral palsy to PTSD. "Imagine a center where how neural technology meets the ancestral wisdom of the human-animal connection," he said, his eyes shining. "A place where people with disabilities can rediscover capabilities they didn't know they possessed, where rehabilitation is not just physical, but also spiritual." As the presentation progressed, the team's initial skepticism transformed into enthusiasm. Engineers proposed adaptations of equipment for outdoor use. Developers suggested apps to monitor therapeutic progress. The finance department began calculating investments and returns. "And the best part," concluded Ryan, "is that we already have the perfect location." He showed images of David Wilson's property and surroundings. "Mr. Wilson has agreed to sell his farm, and we're negotiating for the neighboring lands. 200 acres of preserved nature, with streams, woods, and hills, perfect for therapeutic trails." Brian Campbell, the company's CFO, raised his hand. "Ryan, the project is inspiring, but we need to be realistic about the costs. We just went through a crisis with the Victor case, and investors are apprehensive." Ryan smiled. "Excellent observation, Brian. That's why we're not going to depend solely on traditional investors." He projected another slide. "We already have 3 international foundations interested in partnerships, and this morning I received confirmation that the health department will approve a special grant for research in innovative rehabilitation therapies." The meeting continued for 2 more hours, with heated debates about technical, logistical, and financial aspects. At the end, a sense of renewal hung in the air. The team left energized, with clear tasks and a new purpose. Jessica, who had observed everything silently, approached Ryan when everyone left. "How long have you been planning this?" she asked, impressed with the depth and scope of the proposal. "Since the first time I touched Thunder," Ryan replied honestly. "In that moment, I understood that I had been saved for a reason. Not just to expose Victor's actions, but to create something truly transformative." Jessica smiled, moved by the passion she saw in her friend. "And Thunder, what will his role be in all this?" "He will be the symbol of the project," replied Ryan. "The first of many rescued horses that will help to rescue people. But only if he chooses to stay. I won't force him into anything." "And if he doesn't choose to stay?" Ryan looked out the window toward the distant mountains where he knew Thunder ran freely. "Then I'll respect his choice. But something tells me our paths are destined to remain connected." The full moon partially illuminated the corridor of St. Luke's Hospital. It was shortly after 3 in the morning, and the characteristic silence of dawn was broken only by the occasional noise of medical equipment and distant footsteps of the night staff. In room 512, Amanda Mitchell slept uncomfortably in an armchair next to her father's bed. At 23, Ryan's only daughter had interrupted her veterinary studies in Chicago to be by her father's side during his recovery. Although Ryan had already been discharged, respiratory complications brought him back to the hospital for tests and observation. "Amanda," Ryan whispered, gently awakening. "Go home, sweetheart. You don't need to stay here all night." "No way," she replied, adjusting herself in the armchair. "I'm not going to leave you alone." Ryan smiled, recognizing in his daughter the same determination she had inherited from her mother, Helen. The divorce 8 years ago had been painful, but they had managed to maintain a cordial relationship for Amanda's sake. Helen, now living in Europe with her new husband, called daily to check on his condition. "At least go get some coffee," suggested Ryan, noticing his daughter's dark circles. "You look exhausted." Reluctantly, Amanda agreed. "All right, but I'll be back in 5 minutes." As soon as she left, Ryan turned his attention to the tablet in his lap. He was finalizing the last details of the architectural project for the Renaissance Center. Construction would begin in 2 weeks, and he wanted to ensure everything was perfect. Outside the hospital, a man of ordinary appearance parked a van in the service area. Dressed in a nurse's uniform and carrying a backpack, he went unnoticed by the reduced night security. With decisive movements, he headed to the service elevator. "Mr. Harriman?" asked the security guard as he answered the phone in a luxury condominium in the Riverdale neighborhood. "Speak," replied Victor, his voice tense despite the late hour. "He just entered. He's heading to the 5th floor." "Good. Remind him to leave no traces. I want it to look natural." On the other side of town in his small farm, David Wilson woke up startled. A powerful and agitated neigh cut through the night's silence. Running to the porch, he saw Thunder, who normally didn't approach the house so closely. Agitated, moving nervously in circles, repeatedly looking toward the city. "What's wrong, boy?" asked David, descending the porch steps. "What's bothering?" "You?" The horse neighed again, louder and more urgently, as if trying to communicate something of vital importance. At the hospital, Amanda waited impatiently in line at the 24-hour cafeteria. Only one sleepy employee was attending to the few visitors and professionals on the night shift. Checking the clock, she decided to give up. Her instinct told her she shouldn't have left her father alone. In the 5th floor corridor, the uniformed man moved with familiarity, as if he belonged in that environment. He checked the door numbers until he found room 512. He looked to both sides, making sure he was alone, and removed a syringe from his backpack. The transparent liquid inside would cause a cardiac arrest practically indistinguishable from natural causes, especially in an already debilitated patient. Inside the room, Ryan remained absorbed in his work, unaware of the approaching danger. The only sound was the soft beep of the heart monitor and the occasional hum of the air conditioning system. The door opened silently. The fake nurse entered, closing it behind him. "Can I help you?" asked Ryan, raising his eyes from the tablet. "Just a routine check, Mr. Mitchell," replied the man, approaching the bed with calculated movements. "I need to check your vital signs." Something in the supposed nurse's behavior aroused Ryan's suspicion. The hospital followed rigorous protocols. Nurses always introduced themselves by name, checked the patient's identification bracelet, and rarely made rounds alone during the early hours. "Strange," commented Ryan, trying to buy time. "Nurse Jennifer just did that check half an hour ago." The man hesitated for a second, enough time to confirm Ryan's suspicions. "There must be an error in the schedule," replied the imposter, now just 2 steps from the bed. His right hand held the syringe partially hidden in the uniform sleeve. Ryan discreetly reached for the emergency button attached to the side of the bed, but before he could press it, the man advanced. "Don't move," he ordered, abandoning the facade and revealing the syringe. "This will be quick and painless. Consider it a favor. Victor could have chosen less merciful methods, so he sent you to finish the job," observed Ryan, maintaining calm despite the imminent danger. "Even from prison, he's still trying to get to me." The assassin shrugged. "Nothing personal, just business." As he prepared to administer the lethal injection, a thunderous sound echoed through the corridor. A powerful neigh followed by violent banging. The noise was so loud and unexpected that the man instinctively turned to the door. "What the hell is that?" he muttered, confused. The sound intensified, hooves striking the floor, furious neighs, screams of frightened people. It was an impossible cacophony, as if a wild animal had invaded the hospital. The distraction was all Ryan needed. With a quick movement, he pressed the emergency button. The alarm sounded instantly, making the intruder curse. The door to the room burst open. Amanda rushed in, her eyes wide with panic. "Dad, something's happening out there. There's a whore." She stopped abruptly upon seeing the man with the syringe. The assassin, realizing his plan was compromised, advanced toward the window. Before he could reach it, 2 hospital security guards entered the room, followed by the head nurse of the night shift. "Hold him," shouted Ryan. "He tried to kill me." The man still tried to resist, but was quickly immobilized by the security guards. The syringe fell to the floor, rolling under the bed. "Call the police," ordered the head nurse while checking if Ryan was all right. Amanda ran to embrace her father, trembling with fear and relief. "Dad, you won't believe it. Downstairs, it's thunder." "What?" Ryan couldn't hide his surprise. "He's in the parking lot. He knocked down the fence and is making a huge commotion. That's what created all the confusion." Ryan was silent, for a moment processing the information. How could he know? He murmured, more to himself than to others. While the police were being called and the hospital entered a state of alert, outside, in the darkness of the parking lot, thunder finally calmed down. As if knowing his mission was accomplished, the horse slowly backed away, observing the lights of the 5th floor with an almost human attention. When police sirens began to sound in the distance, the animal turned and disappeared into the night, returning to the hills it now called home. 6 months passed since the dramatic night at the hospital. The golden autumn tinged the hills around Cedar Rapids with shades of amber and red, creating a breathtaking landscape. On top of one of these hills, an impressive complex of modern buildings now stood, harmoniously integrated with nature. Large, glass windows reflected the blue sky and clouds, while green roofs covered with vegetation softened the visual impact of the constructions. It was the grand opening day of the Renaissance Center. Cars began to arrive along the newly paved road that wound to the top of the property. Journalists, authorities, investors, and most importantly, potential patients and their families came to see the revolutionary rehabilitation center conceived by Ryan Mitchell. In the center of the complex, a large circular garden housed an imposing sculpture, a man in a wheelchair and a horse side by side looking toward the horizon. The bronze work, created by a renowned Italian artist, perfectly captured the essence of the connection between Ryan and thunder. "Are you nervous?" asked Jessica, adjusting Ryan's tie. "Curiously, no," he replied, watching the guests arrive. "I feel as if this were the destiny I've been walking toward my entire life, even without knowing it." The Renaissance Center was more than just a hospital or rehabilitation clinic. It was a complete ecosystem where cutting-edge technology and natural therapies complemented each other. Laboratories equipped with the most advanced assistive technology shared space with modern stables, equine therapy tracks, and sensory trails. Through the preserved forest, the idea had captured the imagination of the public and the medical community. In a few months, Ryan had secured partnerships with the country's leading universities, support from international organizations, and even a collaboration program with the national health system, ensuring that people from all social classes could benefit from the treatment. "Dad, it's time," called Amanda, approaching with a radiant smile. After the incident at the hospital, she had decided to transfer her veterinary studies to Cedar Rapids, becoming an integral part of the project. Now she would be responsible for the welfare of the therapeutic horses. Ryan nodded, directing his wheelchair to the stage set up in the central garden. A round of applause greeted him when he took his position in front of the microphone. Among the audience, familiar and unknown faces, all united by the curiosity and hope that the center represented. "Good morning, everyone," Ryan began, his voice firm and clear echoing through the sound system. "Exactly 7 months ago, I was on a bridge under torrential rain, having my life threatened by people driven by greed and power. A respectful silence fell over the audience. The story of Ryan Victor and the miraculous rescue had become widely known. After the foiled attempt at the hospital, Victor had been indicted for aggravated attempted murder. In addition to corporate crimes, his conviction was certain, with abundant evidence against him. That night, when my body fell into the icy waters of the Whitewater River, I was certain that my journey had ended, continued Ryan. But destiny had other plans, and it sent an unlikely messenger to rescue me. His eyes scanned the horizon, pausing for a moment on the wooded hills in the distance. What I learned from this experience wasn't just about survival or justice. It was about connection, about how we are all part of something greater, a web of life where each being, human or animal, has its role and purpose. As Ryan spoke, a murmur began to run through the audience. Heads turned, gazes pointing to something beyond the stage. Amanda, beside her father, was the first to notice. "Dad," she whispered, touching his shoulder. "Look!" Ryan interrupted his speech, following his daughter's gaze. On the top of a nearby hill, illuminated by the morning sun, stood Thunder. The wild horse remained motionless, majestic, like a sentinel observing the inauguration ceremony. Collective gasp of admiration ran through the audience. Many raised cell phones to record the moment. Ryan, however, merely smiled, as if sharing a silent secret with the distant animal. "And speaking of unexpected connections," he resumed, "it seems we have a special guest." In the months since the hospital incident, Thunder had maintained his wild nature. Although he allowed Ryan and a few others to approach him, he had never been captured or domesticated. He moved freely through the lands of the center, appearing and disappearing according to his own will. "The Renaissance Center is not just a place of physical healing," continued Ryan, resuming his speech with renewed emotion. "It's a space to rediscover possibilities, to reconnect with one's inner strength and with the world around." As he concluded his speech, officially announcing the opening of the center, a wave of applause erupted from the audience. Ribbons were cut, doors were opened, and the guests began to explore the facilities guided by an enthusiastic team. Later, when the crowd had already dispersed and the sun was beginning to set, Ryan found a moment of solitude at the highest point of the property. From there, he could see the entire extension of the Renaissance Center, the tangible result of a vision born from the turbulent waters of the river. A soft sound of hooves on the grass announced that he was no longer alone. Without turning, Ryan immediately knew who his visitor was. "Have you come to stay this time?" he asked, sensing Thunder's presence just behind his wheelchair. In response, the horse approached closer, positioning itself beside Ryan. Together, man and animal contemplated the horizon, where the setting sun painted the sky with the same colors of hope: gold, orange, and a deep, infinite blue. "Thank you," whispered Ryan, raising his hand to touch the animal's neck. "For everything." Thunder neighed softly, as if understanding. In his dark eyes was reflected not only the sunset, but also the promise of a new dawn, for both of them, and for all those the center would help in the years to come. The journey that had begun with a fall into darkness now culminated in an ascent to light, and in that perfect moment, under the flaming sky of dusk, Ryan understood that he had not merely been saved on that stormy night. He had been transformed,